Welcome to the West Wing Week, your guide to everything that's happening at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. This week, President Obama announced a bipartisan compromise to reduce the deficit and avoid default, announced a historic fuel efficiency standard that will save American families money, held a cabinet meeting, and celebrated his 50th birthday. That's July 29th to August 4th, or disaster averted. On Friday, July 29th, the President addressed the nation on the status of debt negotiations and on the ongoing effort to find a bipartisan solution to reduce the deficit and avoid defaulting on our obligations for the first time in our nation's history.
Raising the debt ceiling simply gives our country the ability to pay the bills that Congress has already racked up. I want to emphasize that. The debt ceiling does not determine how much more money we can spend. It simply authorizes us to pay the bills we already have racked up. It gives the United States of America the ability to keep its word. The time for putting party first is over. The time for compromise on behalf of the American people is now.
Later, the President announced a historic agreement on a fuel efficiency standard that will save American families $1.7 trillion in fuel costs, and by 2025 result in an average fuel savings of over $8,000 per vehicle.
This agreement on fuel standards represents the single most important step we've ever taken as a nation to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. Think about that. So we are happy to welcome all the auto companies to this effort. I also want to point out all this progress we're talking about today, the promise of this agreement. It is only possible because we've made investments in technology.
Thank you for saving our jobs.
Thanks for saving our jobs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, President.
Later in the day, the President sat down for an interview with a Tartas news agency of Russia, and then welcomed 4 democratically elected African leaders from Niger, Benin, Guinea, and Côte d'Ivoire.
We'll have you sign our guest book.
The President underscored the importance of moving from holding free elections to developing strong institutions and checks and balances, promoting economic growth and development, and leaving a positive legacy for their successors.
Despite the impressive work of all these gentlemen, I've said before, and I think they all agree, Africa does not need strong men. Africa needs strong institutions. So we were working with them as partners to build effective judiciaries, strong civil societies, legislators that are effective and inclusive, making sure that human rights are protected.
On Sunday, July 31st, the President held a news conference to announce the bipartisan compromise to reduce the deficit and raise the debt limit.
It will allow us to avoid default. It will allow us to pay our bills. It will allow us to start reducing our deficit in a responsible way. And it will allow us to turn to the very important business of doing everything we can to create jobs, boost wages, and grow this economy faster than it's currently growing.
On Tuesday, August 2nd, as the final votes were announced from the floor of the Senate chamber, the President prepared to address the American people on the compromise that had been reached to reduce the deficit, avert an economically disastrous default, and the next steps that must be taken on a larger plan to address our fiscal responsibilities.
Voters may have chosen divided government, but they sure didn't vote for dysfunctional government. We've got to do everything in our power to grow this economy and put America back to work. That's what I intend to do, and I'm looking forward to working with Congress to make it happen.
That afternoon, after Bill S-365, or the Budget Control Act of 2011, arrived at the White House, it traveled to the clerk's office, where it was date-stamped, then on to the staff secretary's office, where it was announced, and finally to the Oval Office, where the President signed the bill into law. Later, the President welcomed the crew of the Space Shuttle Endeavour and the U.S. commander of the International Space Station Expedition 26 to the Oval Office and congratulated them on their recent return and their successful mission.
The only person who's more relieved to have you guys back than me or your families, obviously. And you couldn't have made us prouder on the last mission. I had a great time calling up there. And I think it's a great way to cap off an extraordinary career of the shuttle.
On Wednesday, August 3rd, the President held a cabinet meeting where he spoke about the need to end the stalemate in Congress over the FAA, another Washington-made crisis, leaving tens of thousands of folks out of work.
This is a lose-lose-lose situation that can be easily solved if Congress gets back into town and does its job. And they don't even have to come back into town. The House and the Senate could, through a procedural agreement, basically do this through unanimous consent, and they can have the fights that they want to have when they get back. Don't put the livelihoods of thousands of people at risk, don't put projects at risk, and don't let $1 billion at a time when we're scrambling for every dollar we can get left on the table because Congress did not act.
On Thursday, August 4th, the president celebrated his 50th birthday. To find out more information on any of these topics or to see complete videos of these events, go to whitehouse.gov. And thanks again for checking out your West Wing Week.
I'm glad that I have a chance to see some of the great cars that you are manufacturing. As some of you may know, it's only a matter of time until Malia gets her learner's permit. So I'm hoping to see one of those models that gets a top speed of 15 miles an hour. The ejector seat anytime boys are in the car, so hopefully you guys have some of those in the pipeline.